Welcome to Ethos Effect Podcast.
Welcome to the Ethos Effect Podcast.
Podcast.
After building and learning from failures,
We discovered our ethos and leveraged it
to scale, sell, and build again our seven-figure businesses.
whether you're starting out or leveling up.
This podcast is your source for innovation and lasting impact. Today, we got to interview Iren Rainey. He was a former NBA player and now the head of his own school, Iren Rainey School of Basketball. Pretty interesting conversation. Really grounded man, by the way. Really grounded energy.
Yeah, it was a cool story because, I mean, the way I see it, it was kind of like this hybrid between like sports psychologist, guidance,
Friend.
mentality, friend, maybe
Coach.
a little lint brother from Fred Stokes.
Yes.
So kind of this combo to just help develop players, get them to the top of their game.
He is referred to as the human potential engineer, which I thought was such a sweet title.
Cool nickname.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I would love that title myself. But yeah, like Donovan said, it's this psychological, but also performance-based coaching that he does for 30 NBA players. And, speaking to him, incredibly humble.
Mhm.
But he did get into some of the hardships that he's faced in his life, which was awesome. We love when our guests share those vulnerable kind of scary moments. But his was a pivotal moment for him and really got him on this course to human development.
Yeah.
So
Let's get into it.
welcome to the Ethos Effect Podcast. Your host, Chelsea and Donovan Rikus, here with Iren Rainey. He is the owner of Iren Rainey School of Basketball, former NBA player, and entrepreneur. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited that you're here. We love to have our guests in person. Go ahead and catch our listeners up. Who is Iren?
You know what? Currently, I'm a guy that does player development consulting for about 30 NBA guys. They call me the human potential engineer. The main thing that I do is really connect with all of my players from a psychological level before the physical level, in an effort to really help them learn to perform consistently as the best versions of themselves. So that's
Sounds
that in a
like
nutshell.
no easy feat, I would
Absolutely.
say.
Absolutely not.
We had a guest recently, Fred Stokes, and he talked a lot about, when you're, and I actually experienced this too, getting to different levels of sport.
hmm
Like you might be the best in your city or your level, club, high school, whatever it is. And then you get to, NCAA and then you get
Yep.
to pro and it's like, man, my size isn't a differentiator. My skill set isn't a differentiator. It's all up here.
It's all in the mind, for sure.
So at what point in your life did you learn that the mental game was essentially the differentiator?
You know what? I learned a lot as I got older. I actually went through a significant period of adversity in my last year of college, which kind of cost me my professional playing career. And through those experiences kind of helped me understand the power of mindset, belief system, and the correlation with overall performance. And so I kind of dove, straight into what would help me perform as a better athlete, as a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And I took those same principles and started to bestow those same principles onto all of my clients.
Where did you play in college?
You know what? So I signed to WVU, West
Mhm.
Virginia, straight out of high school. But I ended my career at an HBCU, Cheney State University.
Yeah.
So I got a super long story though.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and when you were saying some unfortunate things happen, I'm like, do I dig deeper? Because I'm
Yeah.
super curious. But
Yeah.
we'll get into failures or learning lessons and opportunities a little bit later.
Awesome.
When did you open your business?
My business opened about 10 to 11 years ago.
Okay.
And we've been full throttle ever since. So
That's amazing. I imagine that the clientele of NBA players, it's from a client acquisition standpoint. I'm curious what that looks like.
yeah, it's
How-
grown significantly. I mean,
And how did you grow it?
honestly, a lot of people ask me how I kind of got into business and started. I started as a player, first and foremost, and through playing the game of basketball, through just open gyms and pro-ams, I was able to develop some pretty profound relationships with a bunch of different people, from players to GMs to NBA agents, and from there, the brand just blossomed.
That's
So
amazing.
So it sounds like you're almost like sports psychologist, a little bit kind of like behavioral, like what's kind of that combo? What's that mix that you're working with these guys on? Because it sounds a little bit more like a hybrid than like what I would typically consider like, people bringing in like a shrink for like
Right.
a, you know what I mean?
right.
This is a little bit more real. It's a little more relatable, it
Right.
would seem, to the player, right?
Right. That's well said. It is kind of like a hybrid. If I were to lean in one direction, it would be more so of the the mental aspect. Kind of as I stated earlier, there's a
Mhm.
bunch of different people who embark on, physical performance. And I feel like that's something that's easy to do, whether you're an expert in the field or you're not. I
Okay.
mean, nowadays you can watch a couple of YouTube videos and show somebody how to do a basketball drill.
Mhm.
Right.
But to help a player overachieve and exceed expectation takes a different level of focus. It takes a different level of understanding, holistically, so that players are always moving in a different direction, so to speak. So for me, really embarking on the psychological aspect, what makes them tick, what makes them shut down, what makes them, become motivated, what makes them feel good. Understanding those things is what really helps players have, multiple breakthroughs, which is what I'm looking for.
Do you feel like this high performing teaching that you're doing translates into the business world?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
what would be your advice to entrepreneurs who have that, pressure of high performance every single day, or executives in companies? What could they learn from you?
Honestly, the main thing is probably committing to the habits and the tools that align with the outcomes that they're looking for. So a lot of people are focused solely on the business, but
Mhm.
not understanding that in order to get to the level that they're designed to get to or reach the bottom line, there's a specific set of habits and rituals that would help them move in that direction consistently. So they're not underperforming. And so they always are feeling like they're living in their purpose,
Mhm.
so to speak.
I think it's interesting. A lot of people want to believe that, if their business isn't going well or they're underperforming in whatever aspect of their life, that there's this one thing that's going to fix it.
Right,
Right. And it's almost like shiny object syndrome,
right,
or that
right,
when I get to this point in my life, I will be happy and I will
right.
be a top performer, versus what you're talking about, which
Mhm.
is a daily habit, a daily alignment, or at least that's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm glad I'm on
Absolutely.
the right track.
Yep.
So a player comes to you, and do you exclusively only work with NBA players, or do you work with younger talent too?
No, a bunch of younger talent. We have a huge organization within the School of Basketball, where we have about 16 teams currently on the
Wow.
girls' side and the boys' side.
Oh, so there's a whole club sports
Oh,
aspect to it.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
cool.
And we go from fourth grade all the way through 11th grade. And then we
Okay.
work with athletes that are in their 12th grade year,
Mhm.
as well as athletes that are now in college.
Are you helping them secure scholarships?
Absolutely. That's one
Okay.
of the main things that separates our organization from a lot of organizations, is really embarking on getting scholarships for kids.
That's amazing. So I grew up in Canada, and
Mm,
yeah,
okay.
Canadian. I
Okay.
actually just got my American citizenship about 2 months ago.
Congrats on that.
Thank you. It's a big deal. Took 10 years. Wasn't cheap. But in Canada, I played boys baseball growing up with my twin brother. And then it wasn't until I was 16 years old that I even learned about softball, which is the girl sport, right? And then
Right.
learning about, hey, you could go to the States and you could play in college in Florida, wherever you want to play,
Mhm.
and you could get your schooling paid for, and
Right.
you could travel to the country, and then you can try out for Team Canada, and all these things happened when I was 16. And I feel like for most girls, at least in this country, when you're going to play competitively, you start a hell of a lot younger than that.
For sure.
Right. And then you're trying to hire people like you that
Mhm.
have relationships with colleges and scouts and can get you in front of the right people, get you to those showcase tournaments and things like that. So I imagine there's a great market for it.
For sure. For sure.
Are you just here, or are you all over the country?
We're all over the country. My main space is in Orlando, but I travel quite a bit. Obviously, I have multiple players playing on a conglomeration of teams.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have, kids that are in different states that, hire me to come out and enhance their skill set and work with them on their mindset, etc. So it's fun,
It sounds fun.
for sure.
I always wondered if I could somehow make sport into a business and a life for myself. Didn't work out that way,
No,
so I'm living through you, but that's
no, I
fine.
understand.
Tell me about your own business and building your own teams out and running a living, breathing business. And it being your brand, right?
Right.
Your brand is the business.
Of course.
But I'm curious, and I always like to ask our guests about the people development, the lessons you've learned in
Mhm.
hiring and firing and all that.
Right. You know what? Running a business, as you know, is probably one of the most arduous things a person could take on. As you stated, I am the brand, so I always tell people I don't have the luxury to make the same mistakes as someone just working for someone, right? Because every single decision I make will have a profound effect, not just on myself, but on
Your
the
team.
business. So as far as it's been up to this point, I've done a lot of things on my own, which has been a gift and a curse. A lot of
Mhm.
people, say entrepreneurs are usually control freaks. Maybe, maybe, but
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to make sure things are done right. And
Right.
even if they're not, I want to be able to say I'm the one that didn't do it right. Right.
Yeah,
I'd rather hold
accountability.
myself accountable than rely on someone else and hope they get it, so to speak. And I'm not sure if you all have been through it, but with the influx of chaos, technology, the human predicament, technology is phenomenal. But if you need someone helping you utilize the technology, oftentimes things don't get done the way that we would like. So it's been extremely difficult with that. But I've grown, over the last probably 7 years where I've been able to bring on some pretty reliable people to really help me with structure, with
Mhm.
organizing, especially with us having the influx of teams. It's
Mhm.
not perfect, right?
Never
But we're
is.
doing better than we ever have. With the new help that we've had, a lot of parents of the kids that come through our organization have volunteered to help.
Nice.
Some of them are in tech, some of them are also entrepreneurs, and they also have more time, so
Mhm.
they can do some of the work that I may not necessarily have time to do or necessarily want to do.
Mhm.
So it's been helpful having people around that are willing to see the brand the way I see it to an extent, and really believe in what we're doing. So
So, kind of going back and like building this business, like what was it in your career or your
mhm,
experience with basketball that kind of made you realize like you had a skill here that you could help others with? Was it like something that you had to work through yourself? Was
mhm,
it that, you were maybe developing or coaching younger players? Like,
right.
what was it that kind of made you realize, like, hey, I have a skill set here,
Mhm,
I have a passion for it, and like I think I
right.
can do something with it?
Honestly, that's a pretty profound question. I've always been really good at the game of basketball. Um, we moved to Europe when I was like 8 years old. Lost my father within the first 18 months, so that was detrimental. But you become numb to it, especially when you're great at a sport. And so what happened was I got my identity through playing the game of basketball. And over time, you know how it is in sports, especially in America, when you're told yes, 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 and you're never really held accountable. You can kind of get an artificial sense of reality.
Mhm.
And so in my last year of college, I ended up being incarcerated. I had a limited mindset, limited belief system, made some wrong choices, some wrong decisions. And during that time, it gave me a chance to introspect and get over a lot of insecurities, a lot of fears, which really helped me get to where I am today.
That's amazing.
So,
So
Wow.
you kind of had everything available to you, made some wrong choices, some wrong turns through
right,
some hardships in your
absolutely,
younger career, and you realize like, hey, I guess you kind of saw that it's all in you to like
absolutely,
make the right decisions.
for sure,
That's awesome.
for sure.
If you had to say, this is my why, this is like what guides me every single day to
Mhm.
get up and do all the challenging stuff that I do, what would that why be for you?
Great question. Um, So understanding the need for people to see the importance of their relationship to themselves
Mm.
and the overall human experience. I think it's a profound realization. I think that the world would be a much better place if people understood that. And I think that most people would overachieve, exceed expectations, and become high performance humans. And I think that a lot of times when we have, adversity in the world amongst each other, I
Mhm.
think it's because most of us aren't performing as the best versions of ourselves. And we see somebody else doing it, we become jealous, we become envious. We know we want that, but we don't know how to get there. And so I think that if we were to realize how important it is to change our paradigm within ourselves first, I think that the world would be a much better place. And so that's what really drives me
Mhm.
daily. It's helping people realize their potential.
That's incredible.
Hmm.
That's a cool parallel because you could totally see that, I think, quickly in sports, like, somebody being jealous or envious of like someone else's success in like a sport,
Absolutely.
because it's something you can see faster, and realizing like that same thing happens really in the business world
Hmm.
because they're not seeing the behind the scenes, the work, the practice,
Right.
you know what I mean? All that other kind of stuff.
For sure.
Sports is just always such a cool parallel for anything in business and in life.
Yep.
And I love hearing kind of those stories.
Something we have talked about when we've had really sports related guests on is like that identity crisis that happens after somebody stops playing a sport. Did that happen with you?
You know what? It did to an extent, because once again, I told you I got my identity through playing the game of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's taken away, you realize that you're still living, right? But you don't have the same attention and the same accolades being talked about. And so you got to kind of figure out how to become relevant, right? Without having the sport to be obscured by. And it's funny you say that, because I read both of your bios. Obviously, I was intrigued by yours because obviously you said that you played softball.
Yeah.
But then you went through a period
Head
of
injury.
adversity that you had to kind of get through. And I immediately equated that, to my incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people don't realize that you don't have to necessarily be incarcerated behind a wall, but sometimes our life situation can be like prisons within themselves.
Yes.
And we end up getting caught up and allowing that prison
Yes.
to control, manipulate, and dictate the rest of our reality. And so I commend you for being able to have the breakthrough and finding your husband.
This handsome guy.
Yeah,
well,
so
it all happens. What was strange with or not strange, but what I think was, difficult about my situation was it wasn't just the brain injury happening that stopped me from going to med school, stopped me from trying out for Team Canada, stopped me from all these things. I also finished university that same month.
Wow.
So it's that normal collegiate experience when, if you're not going to continue playing the sport professionally, you already have this time of depression and an identity crisis we just talked about, coupled with, by the way, you're not going to be a doctor. By the way, all the academics you did, nobody gives a shit about anymore.
Right.
By the way, you can't hold a conversation. By the way, you can't even go to the grocery store and shop for your own groceries because it's too overwhelming and overstimulating. And you can't do math, and you can't, and you just, when you said incarceration, like, that's actually what that experience felt like for me. And not only was it, I figuratively was like living in a dark room because I couldn't handle the lights and the noises, but just,
literally in a dark room.
Literally.
Not figuratively.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Literally in a dark room, but figuratively in a dark fucking place.
Right.
I
can only imagine.
But
That's
that,
intense.
and it was, but then there's that like light bulb moment where you're like, this isn't my life story.
Right.
This isn't how this is going. Like, okay, I'm not going to be a doctor. That's fine. I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room anymore. That's fine.
Right.
But I am going to give as many shits as possible to make sure that I am the best version of myself.
Gotcha.
What do you think is the difference between, and like, because people my whole life have told me like, I wish I had your motivation, or I wish that I had that like intrinsic desire to just be the best, right?
Right.
How do you think there's a difference like in people like that versus the people that you work with? Like, do you have to train that in them?
Give me a little more clarity.
Like, I think you're like talking about like their like basically like natural or trained kind of thing. Like,
well, yeah. So in my situation, right, I'm got the brain injury thing, got all this shit going on, but I am still
breaking through it.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't
got
give
you.
a shit how hard this is going to be. Like,
Got
I
it.
will come out on the other side as a better
Got you.
version.
Got you.
But some people might not be able to do that.
I know exactly what you mean.
What is the difference?
That's a great question. And I think it's going to take a little more science and a little more research.
Yeah.
I've seen multiple situations. I've seen people that, like yourself, that just get it, and like myself, who just get it. And I think it all boils down to a choice. One of my favorite speakers, Tony Robbins, said that it's in our moments of decision where our destiny is shaped. And I don't think people realize how imperative it is to make the best choice no matter what situation you're in. And once again, some people get it, some people don't. Some people have a bigger reason for why they need to get it. Other people feel like it's okay not to get it. So I've seen different people in all walks of life. I mean, you never know who the people are that are going to choose to get it and the people who aren't.
And that's ultimately what you're doing, right? You're facilitating that choice for people.
Absolutely.
So what does it actually look like? Somebody hires you, they're a high-performing, NBA player, or they want to be a high-performing NBA player, and, you meet with them. How are you uncovering their weaknesses and their strengths? Is it like we're verbally talking, or do you have them out on the court? Like, how do you figure out what the problem is?
So typically what I like to do is really connect with my clients at the most vulnerable and the most authentic place before we actually step in on the court. I like to drink coffee personally. So a lot of times I'll invite them to a coffee shop and, have coffee, have some dialogue. I kind of learn who they are, where they come from, what their goals are, what their purpose is, who's around them, so to speak, who may be able to influence them, what they want from the game of basketball and what they want from the overall life game. And from there, I kind of draw out what their journey with me will look like on my own. I don't really show them. I just ask a lot of questions, have a lot of dialogue, connect with them, try to give them some, pieces of advice while we're there. And then from there, we build out, the workouts. And they change over time because, some players overachieve early, some players don't, right? And so I'm constantly refiguring out what these players need. But it starts with that initial dialogue, that initial conversation, so I can really learn who these people really are.
It reminds me a lot of employees. I mean, no one's paying me to do this. It's actually the opposite. I'm paying them.
Right.
However, that investment of they need to know that you have their best interest at heart, right? That
Absolutely.
You are designing a program for them to succeed within your organization and within their life. How important is that trust component? Have you ever had clients where you guys just don't vibe and it's sorry, dude, I can't help you?
No, trust me. I know exactly what you mean. I'm really big on energy. I honestly don't take on just any client. Similar to Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan's trainer back in the day. I'm not sure if you know who he is. But for the most part, the guys who I have with me, we've always vibed. Some players have bigger egos than others. But a lot of times when they're with me, just because of how I carry myself, their egos kind of settle down a little bit.
Yeah.
And not saying I'm saying anything or doing anything to make them, but I think it's just an energy thing. It's a feel thing, right?
It's probably a safety thing too. They don't have to overcompensate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm always talking to them how unreal egos are and how the ego feels vulnerable, it feels insecure, and it always needs to attach itself to something. And so the more they hear me talk about that, the more aware they become. And so now we're able to get more out of every session or every conversation because it's more authentic and they're willing to be a little more vulnerable.
That's really cool.
Absolutely.
How do you scale a business that, it's really dependent on your individual skill set?
Right. That's a great question. I've thought about that, over the last 5 years, and I've had multiple conversations with business consultants. I mean, people who are in a much better situation than I am, who have already done it. And for me, I don't think I'll be able to honestly scale part of my business, but the other part, as far as the youth side, I think will be a lot easier because, as you said, the trust component is huge.
Yeah.
So even if I wanted to scale it, they're still going to have to trust someone else, and that someone else may not have the same intentions as I do. It may be, to make more money, but it may not be to actually empower a new player. So to answer your question, I don't know if I'll be able to scale the NBA side, but the youth side, I definitely think will be scalable.
Yeah, repeatable processes.
I think the NBA side will be scaled monetarily.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So
the return.
That's going to require you for sure.
The 80-20.
Right. But you could have certainly a framework for the youth, and then you're spending your time with that high performing athlete.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Higher revenue
Absolutely.
generating side probably too. So where can our listeners find you if they want to follow your journey or maybe even get involved with the school?
You know what? They can find me on Instagram. It's my name. It's at Iren, I-R-E-N, last name Rainey, R-A-I-N-E-Y. We do a lot of stuff on social media. Not as much as we should be, but
I feel like everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
Every business,
enough. I mean, the website is on there. A place to sign up for our school is on there, and phone number is on there. So it's a great place.
Last question. In general, business, life, athletes, what do you think, if you're the human potential engineer, I'm super curious, what is the key to high performance? If you had to pick one, I know it's multifaceted.
Okay. I would say, and I thought you were going to ask me another question earlier because I went through the questions that you all might be asking. So
he's like, that was
right? But For me, I'll go back to when I was incarcerated, right, was probably the darkest place that I've ever been in, one of the most negative environments, but I turned it into a positive. But if a person truly wants to live a blissful life, a rewarding life, a successful life, they have to do the things that would cause them to live it, which is kind of broad, but
No, I feel that.
you have to be it first, do it, and then have it.
Yes.
So it takes a major paradigm shift. You have to literally become dead to your former self and turn into somebody totally different. You have to turn into the thing that you desire to become.
It's powerful.
Yeah, it's that simple.
Be it, do it, have it.
Yep.
Be it,
That's
do
it.
it, have
I like
it.
it.
That's
That's
the
it.
title of this episode.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been
Appreciate it,
fun.
man.
Listeners, don't forget, share, like, subscribe. We'll see you next week on the Ethos Effect podcast.